With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to... Has anyone seen the bride and groom?
Sorry, we're here. We were getting lucky in the limo and we lost track of time.
No, Lucky Land Casino, with cash prizes that add up quicker than a guest registry.
In that case, I pronounce you lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Daily bonuses are waiting. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. With Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woohooer, a hand clapper, a high fiver? I kind of like the high five, but if you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. At ChumbaCasino.com, choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses, so don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.
Look, I think strike rate's very, very overrated.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strike Rate, the cricket analytics podcast with me, Jack Hope, and Dan Weston. On today's episode, we're going all IPL. We've done two quite hardcore episodes on stats. This one's going to be a little bit more fun. We're basically going to pick our recent IPL Dream 11, looking at the last two seasons, post-COVID, basically, and naming the guys we would select in our team, plus maybe a few impact subs. Dan, how you doing? Are you looking forward to the IPL, first and foremost?
Can't wait. It's my favourite time of the year, apart from the auction. No, it's fantastic. I think it's this year as well. It's shaping up to be a really competitive tournament where actually, you wouldn't really want to write anyone off. I listened to all your guys' previews on the cricket podcast so far, and I think you guys got it largely spot on. I think it's a dangerous game to write off any team, even though there are a few which look better than the others.
And that's my feelings. I think in the last few years, there's been like a team that's quite clearly not up to the mark. But this year, even and I think this is partly because even some of the good teams have got some quite big question marks. Where the wheels could come off, and some of the bad teams have got like 2 or 3 players who are monsters.
Yeah,
so balances out well.
That's because there's just a scarcity of resources, so it's really hard to cover every base in your team with the person that's available. There's and we'll talk about this. I think actually as we move on with this pod, is that actually if there's only 2 or 3 like high level, like considerably win above replacement, if you were looking at it from that metric, players in a certain playing role, and there's 10 teams that all need that, they're either going to go for huge money, and there's going to be 7 teams who don't have that player or who don't have that type of player. So
or 9 teams.
Well, yeah.
Oh no, yeah. That's all right. I just did the maths in my head there. I thought you were talking about individual players, but you're talking about role.
yeah. And then there's the fact that there's still probably a lot of excess spending on players that don't need to be spent so much money on, and which constrains budgets as well. And I think ultimately, there's those problems are going to create a pretty level playing field, given the fact that we're in a level budget league, broadly speaking.
Cool. Dan, so what we're going to do on this episode is we're going to take it in turns to pick players in a kind of snake draft order, but with only 2 people. And no, it doesn't snake back, it just bounces back and forward. So actually nothing like a snake draft. And get through the 11. So obviously we'll make a cricket team. We're basing this on players' performance over the last couple of years. So if your favourite guy didn't make it, but they were really good in 2021, sorry, they missed the cutoff. And there's nothing we can do about that. Then we'll be talking about their stats, why they fit the role, maybe a little bit of speculation about how they'll do in 2024. It's a slightly more topical episode than some of our others. Just a shout out as well to ourselves, basically, that you should go back and listen to other pods by Strike Rate if you're interested in cricket analytics. Most of the rest of the podcasts we've designed them to be quite evergreen, so you could just sort of dip in and out of the various topics and hopefully learn something about the game. And obviously make sure you're liking and subscribing wherever you're listening or watching. Dan, we set this up with you as the first chooser. Who takes ball one? And we probably need to come up with a team name at some point for this as well. But who takes ball one for this super franchise that we're creating?
Well, I'm gonna cause controversy here because actually, Jack, you stitched me up a little bit there because we had an opener each, and I had one, and you had two, but you picked two before I picked one, and I would have picked two. I was left, and it's still a very, 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 very effective opener for sure. Leads the batting averages and therefore balls per dismissal pretty much for the entire comp over the last 2 years, giving us a really solid start to our team. Now, power play success is a crucial factor for the success of T20 teams. So having a guy who can strike overall as an opener in the last 2 years, the IPL, pretty much 150 with 32 balls per dismissal and hitting almost 20% boundaries, but also an unbelievable non-boundary strike rate of about 75, which is for an opener is like 85, 90 for any other place. 300s in the last 2 years, Shubman Gill.
I think I can get behind that, to be honest. I mean, like last year probably ranks in the top 5 seasons for just pure destruction and pure batting, basically. It's kind of a bit of a breakout year. Now, it's an interesting one with Gill because if you looked at his career up until that point, you'd probably have said maybe slightly above average opener, maybe an average opener. So it is quite heavily influenced by last year, but last year was so unbelievably good that it is quite difficult to look past him. So I think I endorse the message, Dan. I'm behind you on Shubman Gill there.
Are we allowed discussion points and honourable mentions and things like that as well?
Well, why don't I throw out the person that you'd have picked at 2 or at number 1, and then we can get to that. I went with another Indian player. Obviously, there's I think there'll be a talking point straight away here because somebody we haven't picked is quite good. In fact, the second top run scorer after Gill. I went for Jaiswal though, and this is largely based on him compared to the wider body of T20 players. And if you rank him there, he's in like the top 80%, in the top 20%, sorry, for balls per dismissal, for strike rate, for boundary percentage, like basically any metric that would measure a T20 player in more or less any phase of the game, Yashasvi Jaiswal is going to be right up the top. Throw into that, you get a little bonus that he is a left-hander, and I think that's a pretty good opening partnership. Is there anything you'd add on Jaiswal? Because obviously you wanted to pick him too.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, and he just looks like he's a player who's getting better and better. I'm not a massive buyer into the sort of Test cricket driving T20 performances, but what we have seen in the recent Test series is just this huge upward curve that this opener is on right now. And for me, one of the few players in the world that I would pay good money to watch as a spectator. Just excites me just so much, this stroke making and the high intent levels that he has. And interestingly, if we look at any batter who faced over 300 balls last season, him and Gill are the top 2 players in terms of strike rate out of openers.
Yeah, that's pretty good. I mean, if you want Jaiswal's numbers broken down a little bit more, ball per dismissal rate in the IPL last year was 29.4, and I think it's about that in taking a longer view as well. And he struck at 163, which is pretty good. And then if you want to boil that down or drill down a little bit more just into the power play, Jaiswal across all of T20 is like a top 5% player when it comes to strike rate and a top 30% player when it comes to ball per dismissal. And I think last week, Dan, we were talking about how you generally see openers fall into two categories, like a power play exploiter who gets out a lot but has a high strike rate, and the kind of reverse, the KL Rahul, who doesn't get out very often but has a low strike rate relative. Jaiswal's doing both. Like he's exploiting the power play and giving you that stability. I mean, he'd be one of my. I think if I was looking ahead at building a franchise in the IPL, he would be one of the first names on the team sheet when you add the whole package together, and obviously including the fact that he's an Indian player. Dan, we didn't pick Jos Buttler, which, you know, I looked at the audience stats. 55% of our audience are English. 55% of people probably throwing their hat in the air right now or on the floor, wherever you throw your hat when you're angry. Why didn't we pick Jos Buttler?
Well, at first glance, it looks, I think, curious to swerve a guy who's got 4 tons in the last 2 IPLs combined, and strikes at 147, averages 45 in those 2 seasons. Slightly higher boundary percentage than Gill by several percent, but the non-boundary strike rate is not as good. And I think this is where, and we're kind of maybe a bit more light-hearted here in terms of the decisions that we have to make and line calls for different players. But actually, it goes back to a really critical point in that when you're constructing a squad, a list, a roster, whatever you want to call it, different countries have different words. We've got to look at the combinations of players. Is it how we're gonna structure 4 overseas players into this 11? Which areas are strong in the domestic player pool and weak in other areas? And ultimately, a Gill-Jaiswal partnership, not only are they the 2 best strikers in the last 2 years as openers in the IPL out of anyone who's faced a decent samples, but they're domestic players, which allows us to pick 4 from 9 overseas players in other roles where perhaps the domestic players aren't as strong, and gives us longevity in this team. 10-year opening partnership.
Yeah, it's a shame there's a mega auction next year and we have to put one of them.
Keep them both.
Yeah, keep both. Cool. Should we move on to number 3 then? I think this was your selection, so do you want to tell us who you picked and why?
Yeah. Okay. So first of all, broad point. I had a look at the guys who hit play at like 3 or 4 in the IPL over the last 2 seasons, and it's so hard to find players who strike at 140 plus who face over 300 balls in this sample size over 2 seasons. Like, and I remember when I was first sort of constructing, or had my thoughts of constructing a 100 squad in 2019. That 3 on 4 slot is so critical, and we kind of it's easy to see that actually that player has got to be both either have a super strength in terms of hitting and ideally pace and spin, or they've got to be a collapse averter who's not going to chew up balls, which, like, I mean, these players just don't exist. So there was only one man for the job, and that was Glenn Maxwell, who has struck at 177 in the last 2 years of the IPL, hitting boundaries 27% of balls faced. That's more often than 1 in 4 balls, which is just truly insane numbers. He consistently hits a high strike rate, match contributing knocks, and he gets in some match-up off spin as well for us, which we don't have in the squad. So when we're playing against a team with a load of left-handers, we get 4 overs out of Maxwell as well. The other players who kind of fit into that filter were Sanju Samson, definitely a really, really strong player as well, and probably a bit undervalued by his national team. And also Liam Livingstone, who's done well, particularly in 2022 for Punjab Kings as well. So those are 2 other players who sort of done well in the sort of top order of non-openers. but it's really hard to find them. So Maxwell was the easy shoe-in for me.
Yeah, when I initially saw you put this down, I thought that this was going to break the rules a little bit and that Maxwell hadn't really batted at number 3. But then I looked into it and he has played. He's actually he'd be in the top 10 batters the 13th most appearances as a number 3 in the IPL over the last 2 years. So not quite in the top 10. So maybe, but I think there's a strong enough argument that he can bat number 3 that he is permitted, and I think you make really good points around the full package that he brings. And then if you want to go into the data a little more, and I thought Samson was a really good shout. I think Samson is a really good player, so this isn't necessarily a knock on Samson. But if you look at the phases that they're going to bat in, so the middle overs, primarily, maybe a little bit of power play, the difference in strike rate between Maxwell and Samson is pretty big. So let's take the middle overs. Maxwell striking at 154, Samson is down at 140, and I think there's going to be a material difference in runs at the end of that. If you're interested in the balls per dismissal rate, maybe you're thinking that Samson is batting for a lot longer. Samson's actually, his balls per dismissal rate is 1.5 balls higher than Maxwell's, so that's almost a wash, but you're getting quite a lot more aggression if you just look at those raw numbers there, and quite a lot more runs ultimately out of Glenn Maxwell across that phase versus Samson. So I think it's a fair shout. You talked a little bit about what you want from an ideal number 3. Do you want to go into that in a little bit more detail in any way?
Yeah. So obviously the number 3 is probably gonna have more variable roles than any other batting position. Maybe 3, 4. I would lump them all in together. So you know if you're coming in at say number 7, you're going to be pretty much always a finisher. If you open, you're going to be batting at the start of the innings when no wickets are lost at the start. But 3 or 4, you can come in and suddenly 2 wickets, 3 wickets are down real quick, or you can come in after the openers are set a platform. And so you've got to be adept at a collapse averter and or be amazing at striking and building on the platform that your openers have been able to provide. Not just that, you don't know if you're going to be batting in the power play when pacers largely feature, or in the middle overs where spinners largely feature. So you've got to be a strong player of both, and that's really, really tough. I mean, if we were to say filter for top 10, 15% players for all of those skill sets, there'd be pretty much no one.
Yeah. There we go. So number 4, I've gone with probably the easiest pick, I think, of the whole thing. I've gone for Surya Kumar Yadav, who actually, if you look at the raw numbers, is pretty similar to Maxwell, except that he's sort of one higher on most metrics. So you get Maxwell in at number 2 on strike rate. Who's above him? It is Surya Kumar Yadav. The guy is, he's an absolute beast. And what I was thinking about here, or what makes him so good maybe, is that his game is so well-rounded. Like, there isn't really a type of bowling, except maybe arguably left-arm orthodox, and you can maybe shield him here with that in mind. But there isn't really a type of bowling that he's going to be weak against. He's going to destroy virtually everything. He's quite hard to get out. He strikes. I mean, like I said, he has the highest strike rate in anyone in the IPL last year. So you're getting huge explosiveness, and he can play just such a vast array of shots. I mean, like that's maybe slightly less analytical, and that's slightly more eye test. But I don't think there's anyone really in world cricket that can hit to as many parts of the ground as Surya Kumar Yadav. So Dan, I think that's pretty uncontroversial, but is there any argument that you can think of for anybody else except for Sky at number 4?
Only probably the player who we've picked at number 6, or you've picked at number 6. So yeah, they're the 2 outstanding candidates, I think.
Yeah. I don't know if there's anything you say about 4 as a role. I mean, does it distinguish itself from 3 in any way? Is there anything that makes Surya Kumar Yadav a particularly good 4 versus 3?
Look, I think because of the explosiveness that he has as well, and that's important to sort of have the opportunity to do that rather than being a collapse averter as well. So maybe a slightly lower position is fine for him. 3-4, you're looking at a broadly similar type of skill set, I think, overall, in terms of that flexible player. And so good against pace, good against spin, might be batting in the power play, might be batting in the middle, might need to shore up a collapse, might need to tee off after the openers have got to, say, 12 overs. But there's a lot of different factors. So, yeah, no, similar skill sets to 3 and 4.
Cool. Dan, we're going to take a really quick break there. Then we're going to come back and we'll get into the middle order.
With the Lucky Land Slots, you can get lucky just about anywhere.
This is your captain speaking. We've got clear runway and the weather's fine, but we're just going to circle up here a while and get lucky. No, nothing like that. It's just these cash prizes add up quick. So I suggest you sit back, keep your tray table upright, and start getting lucky.
Play for free at LuckyLandSlots.com. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details. Lucky Land Casino, asking people, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
Lucky? In line at the deli, I guess?
Aha, in my dentist's office. More than once, actually.
Do I have to say?
Yes, you do.
In the car before my kids' PTA meeting.
Really?
Yes.
Excuse me, what's the weirdest place you've gotten lucky?
I never win and tell.
Well, there you have it. You can get lucky anywhere, playing at LuckyLandSlots.com. Play for free right now. Are you feeling lucky? No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+. Terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Welcome back, everyone, to Strike Rate, the cricket analytics podcast with me, Jack Hope, and Dan Weston. We're going through our post-COVID IPL dream team. We've done the top order. So far, we've got Shubman Gill, Jaiswal, Glenn Maxwell, Surya Kumar Yadav. Jaiswal didn't get his full name there. Don't know why, but he didn't. And that's going to say the same. We're about to get to the middle order. Before we do, just a reminder, please do click like and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching, and tell a friend. We've had decent audience growth so far, and thank you to everyone who has shared the podcast, and a big thank you to those who have sent in a question for this show or a previous one, or just sent us a nice message saying that you're enjoying listening. We're happy to hear that, and we want to keep growing. So, Dan, number 5, who are you picking in our IPL dream team?
Yeah, easy pick. But first of all, I just want to echo what you said there, Jack, as well. It's really, really appreciating the interaction from our valued listeners. And consistently, please feel free to get comments in, questions in, topic suggestions in, whatever you think you would like to hear or you want to know more, give us feedback about. Please do so, and tell your friends, tell everybody, tell the world about this podcast, that they need to subscribe, they need to like, and I need to give us a 5-star review. If you can do that, we'll be so grateful. Back to number 5, Rinku Singh. Easy choice. And actually, with him in mind, we don't need anyone more batting. We actually don't need when you've got Gill, Jaiswal, Maxwell, Sky, and Rinku, that adds up to about 140 balls per dismissal in the IPL in the last 2 years. So not that we're swerving any more batters, but I think we're going to be pretty confident we're not going to be bowled out by many teams, especially when we've got impact subs to come as well. So yeah, back to Rinku, and he averaged almost 50 in the IPL in the last 2 seasons, balls per dismissal of 34. And not just that, he has slaughtered international cricket so far as well. So there really isn't much to say about that in terms of controversy. The only thing I would say is that the nature of how we've structured this means that I got number 5 and Jack got number 6, and so I think there's probably a reasonable argument to swap 5 and number 6 round actually in the batting order. Certainly in terms of entry points, Rinku, I wouldn't want to see him exposed to spin that much. Strikes in the IPL and international cricket in the last couple of years, 125 against leg spin and 112 against off spin. But I do think that this is where we can do what I like to do anyway in terms of strategy. But Jack, you also mentioned it in terms of MS Dhoni in your CSK preview with the cricket podcast as well, is that he just uses people in the right roles. So we're going to use Rinku Singh as that kind of pace hitter because he's unbelievable at it. I wouldn't. There'd be a very short list of players I would rather have as a death hitter than him right now.
100%. Rinku Singh's sort of emergence over the last, probably really only the last 12 months, isn't it? Has been a real joy to watch. Obviously, him taking down Yash Dayal is the kind of kicking the door in moment. And in a sense, when that happened, my take on that, lots of people were like, "Oh, that's unbelievable." I mean, like the guys hit 5 sixes, and obviously it was, but he was in a scenario where the only option was to try and hit sixes. So I think it was probably slightly less unbelievable than I thought. It's a bit like, and you were on the receiving end of this. I hate to bring it up. It was like a bigger version of when Rahul Tewacha hit Odean Smith for 2 sixes, and that was also unbelievable. But the guy had no option other than trying to launch the ball out of the stadium, and he managed to connect a few times. And I think actually the chances of a player hitting a load of sixes, if all they're trying to do is hit sixes, and they've got a nice matchup, is probably a bit higher than people think. What's impressed me is that actually it sort of turns out that it wasn't really a fluke. Like, this guy actually does appear to be that good, and it wasn't just a lucky moment in the right situation, as it were. This is a guy with sort of serious talent, and some of what he's done in international cricket has been pretty incredible as well. One thing with him that I did notice, and I went through this because you mentioned balls per dismissal, and it's not necessarily something that is maybe super high priority at number 5, but it does stand out for Rinku Singh that he barely ever has been out so far. And if you have a look at him and and how he bats, and specifically the number of sixes he hits, he is a big outlier there. So most guys hit over, I think it was 9% sixes, are out more than every 20 balls, and Rinku Singh is something like out once every 35 balls. Do you think we'll see a little bit of regression there? There's something in his game that might be differentiating himself from some of those other power hitters?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be unrealistic to expect his balls per dismissal to stay so high throughout his career as a finisher. But yeah, he's clearly doing everything really, really well in his career. Like you're saying, hitting sixes and not getting out should be a mutually exclusive thing.
Well, they are basically, but it's not for him. Yeah,
apart from him. So yeah, that's exactly why I feel like that. He's got to revert to the mean, but at the moment is the outstanding finisher really in the IPL, I think, right now.
Cool. So I've got number 6, and we do need a wicketkeeper at this point. So by process of elimination, most of the listeners have probably come to the conclusion that I came to when I had to make this selection. That is Heinrich Klaasen, the man who absolutely lit it up for Sunrisers Hyderabad last year. A monster. I mean, another monster. I'll get his stats up in a second. I should have done that a moment ago. But Dan, Heinrich Klaasen, just how good is he? Because I think there's a serious case that he's the number 1 player in T20 cricket at the moment in the world. Batting wise.
I think we spoke about him a little bit last couple of weeks on the stats pod that we did, batting stats and batting benchmarks, where basically we talked about how, and similar to Rinky Singh to some degree, it's so difficult to have both stability and intent. And the players who do that, you're talking about someone like AB de Villiers in the past, who was consistently able to do so as well. They're just so rare in T20 cricket. So when you find one like Klaasen, who has a high boundary percentage and high balls per dismissal, you really have to celebrate them. And certainly, for my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of other people now, really the outstanding batter or one of the outstanding batters in T20 cricket right now around the world.
Yeah, unbelievable. He scored 448 runs last year, averaging 50, the strike rate of 177, 1 ton and 2 50s. Now, he played a couple of different roles, so he'd have to bat a little bit lower in this team than some of the other teams he's played in. I did check; he has batted at 6 in the IPL, so I think he's eligible for this selection. Dan, he is, however, or he has only played the last season in the IPL. So if we were taking a slightly longer view, or if you wanted to be controversial, is there someone else that you might have thought about for this particular role?
Yeah, we need a keeper, right? So that's got to be another consideration.
Yes.
Otherwise, we're having Chaos Virat as an impact sub. Look, I don't like him as a 6. I actually think he does bat 6 and has batted 6 for various teams, but I don't like him batting 6 because I think he's too good against spin to I think he's a waste at 6 actually. But you could go with someone like a Nicholas Pooran who gives you that keeping option, left-handed and high intent batter as well.
I did think Pooran was slightly harshly done by. He's right up there, and it's only really because of the brilliance of the last 4 guys we've talked about, from Maxwell down, that Pooran isn't in the side. I mean, it's unlucky, I think, for Nicholas Pooran, and in fact, if you just pull up the data for the last 3 years, I think last 2 years. Sorry, we're talking about the last 2 years for guys who have batted 4, 5, 6, or 7. Pooran does have the 3rd highest strike rate, so arguably we've missed there. Although I think I can defend our team, bearing in mind the roles we needed to select. One other guy before we get to the kind of more all-rounder / bowly positions. One other guy that obviously isn't going to make the team at this point is Mumbai Indians' new captain, Hardik Pandya. Arguably, Dan, he is the most valuable player in the IPL. So why have we not picked him in our dream team?
When you say most valuable player, do you mean like if there was a mega auction tomorrow and no one was out?
Yeah.
Players.
Yeah, currency-wise.
I think he wouldn't be.
Okay. Well, he'd be in the top 10.
He'd be in the top 2 probably. But I think Bumrah would go for number 1, or maybe even Rashid Khan. Definitely, Rashid Khan would definitely be the highest, most expensive overseas player. I mean, anyone who pays more for anyone overseas player than Rashid Khan needs to have a hard look at themselves, basically. Going back to Hardik, well, he's batted higher up the order a little bit for GT over the last couple of years, and actually has kind of played more responsibly, which I don't necessarily think plays to his strengths as an individual. It might have been what the team needed at the time, but I think also that the other issue is, and it goes back to this open market valuation of a player. I mean, the amount of times, what's the percentage of times over the last, say, 2-3 years that he's been 100% fit or close to 100% fit and able to bowl 4 overs? It's not often. And so you want to be spending a lot of money on a guy who hasn't really been fully fit for a long period of time. No difference to someone like a Stokes, for example, as well.
Actually, on that point, and this is probably the biggest reason I didn't pick him. I think if you had like a fit Hardik Pandya from 2019, let's say, he's like maybe the first choice. You're thinking about how do we build this team around Hardik, but we're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy who's not struck above 140 for 2 years with the bat and has been averaging less than 11 balls a game with the ball. So probably, and I haven't got Maxwell's numbers up here in front of me, probably Maxwell is bowling more than 11 overs a game in the IPL over the last 11 balls per game in the IPL over the last 2 years. So he moves into a slightly different category of player when you factor that in. Dan, should we move on? Number 7.
Yeah, well, we need an all-rounder in the team, obviously, and I think actually you can say that, you go back to the Hardik point, is that I think it's a bit of a stretch to say that someone who bowls 11 balls per match is a genuine all-rounder, because I don't think they are. Whether that's because of ability or whether it's because of injury, for the reason for different players, I think that the point still stands. I think number 7 is a player who's in a little bit of a decline. There's a little bit of injury proneness about him too, but he gets on the pitch and bowls more than Hardik does. So he got my vote, and because also he has a 6-4 ratio in the last 2 years of the IPL of 1.65. So basically, he hits 1.5 sixes for every 4 he hits. So, which is like unheard of numbers. It really, really is. And it is tough. And going back to the scarcity of resources point of view as well, it is tough to find a bowling option at 7 who hits well. Certainly in the domestic market, really difficult. So I went with Andre Russell, who strikes overall at 174 in the last 2 years of the IPL, hits a boundary over more frequently than 1 in 4 balls, and as I say, hits way more sixes than he does 4s, which is pretty much what you want as your death finisher, and he provides that. Look, with the ball, I think the economy rate is a massive concern. However, he is a wicket taker. He last 2 years for KKR, he's taken a wicket every 8.6 balls in the power play, and there's, with the high economy, yes, that's becomes more acceptable when you're taking a wicket every 8.6 balls in the power play. If you can sustain that, actually, you'd probably be net positive even going at 10s. And also with an impact sub and Maxwell in the top 6 as well, we don't really need to bowl him. So we don't need to bowl him that much. Certainly not 4 overs bowlers, because we've got, with an impact sub, 6 bowlers plus him. So I wouldn't use him as a death option. Would I use him as a 1 in the power play and 1 or 2 in the middle? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, I like Dre Russ in a team. Like you say, there's questions about decline, but if we're looking over the last couple of years, I think there's still enough in the tank, or enough that he's shown us enough that he'd make it into a team. Number 8, I've gone, and I think this was a really easy choice as well, Rashid Khan. As you said, probably the number 1 overseas selection. I'd say probably. I mean, like, who else is actually even in that conversation? Maxwell, I don't know. Even then, I think that would be a real stretch if you were to go for someone else over him. Obviously,
that Kane Williamson was years ago.
Well, yeah, they did. I think he's taken nearly 50 wickets in the last 2 years, which is pretty good. But what makes him even better is that his batting has sort of really exploded in that time as well. And in the last couple of years, he struck over 200, which is bonkers. Now, obviously, batting at number 8 or 9, where he does for Gujarat, or occasionally 7, 1 or 2 quite good innings or quite explosive innings can skew those numbers a little bit. But even taken with a pinch of salt, I think it's hard to look past Rashid Khan as an overseas number 8 position, and not a bad fielder too, if you want to throw that into the mix. Stan, Rashid Khan, what's so special about Rashid Khan?
I mean, what can't he do apart from last a long time with a bat? He's here for a good time, not a long time necessarily when in that finishing role. But I mean, he's literally, if you could design a prototype of a player in T20 cricket who's going to earn a lot of money and be impactful for every team in every role that he plays, is basically him, right? Literally, I always say to bowlers, work on your hitting, because mediocre all-rounders or bowlers who can have a cameo innings, I should be more specific and say, they just earn so much money. So I always say to bowlers, just how can you hit 3 boundaries and 7 balls, 3 boundaries and 8 balls kind of thing? And he does that consistently, and sometimes a lot better than that too. And fantastic with the bat, and obviously with this primary skill set being the ball, just consistently low economy and regular wicket taking, and can bowl a little bit in the early death as well. So you've got a bit of face flexibility too. Strong against both righties and lefties. There really isn't any debate about Rashid Khan at 8, I think.
Yeah, 46 wickets, an economy of 7.44. So he's the he's the 3rd top wicket taker. An economy that would put him in the top 10. A strike rate that would put him just outside the top 10. But then if you factor in the fact that he isn't bowling at the death all the time, and he's bowling in the phase of the game or phases of the game where wickets are less common, it's the true strike rate, if you like, would be a lot higher. Factoring in those things. And what he's done with the bat recently has been pretty astonishing too. Dad, should we take another really quick break and then we'll come together for the bowlers and the impact subs? Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strike Rate, the Cricket Analytics podcast with me, Jack Hope, and Dan Weston. We're going through our IPL Dream Team, factoring in performances over the last couple of years. The team so far is Shubman Gill, Jaiswal, Glenn Maxwell, Surya Kumar Yadav, Rinku Singh, Heinrich Klaasen, Andre Russell, Rashid Khan. We're about to get to the true bowlers, if you like, and we'll maybe try and throw an impact sub in there as well, although that feels a bit like cheating. Bearing in mind, we've Mumbai Indians this and got all these players on a trade for free. Who's at number 9, Dan?
Well, number 9 was a really, really tough choice because I toyed with the idea of a left-arm orthodox, but because then we'd have left-arm orthodox off spin and leg spin. But I just haven't been overly sold by either sort of Jadeja or Akshar Patel in the last couple of years, and picking Saika Shaw would be cheating based on this, even though I think if he actually played, he'd be amazing. And I also needed to leave you an overseas slot 6 well, because I hadn't picked that one by this point, so I had to go to Weston. And there was one spinner who took more wickets than Rashid Khan in the last 2 years of the IPL, with 48 in 31 innings, and Rashid Khan, I think, got 46 in 33. And Yuji Chahal was our man. He's going to play at number 9. Sort of, we got 3 tail enders, three 10 or 11s at 9, 10, and 11. But I don't think it matters with a batting. A stacked top 8 and an impact sub potentially as well. I don't think there's a major issue there. Look, Chahal averages less than 20, economy rate of less than 8, and takes a wicket every 15 balls, which is incredible for a spinner who largely bowls in the middle overs, and concedes boundaries like 13.5% of the time in the last 2 years in the IPL, which is just truly outstanding numbers. So with his wicket taking and frequency of wickets and disrupting teams in the middle overs, we take Chahal at number 9. There's an honourable mention, and I actually think that I had a look at his stats in quite a lot of detail. And considering he bats as well, but he's an overseas player, so I didn't choose him. I just wanted to have a mention as well for Wanandu Hasaranga, who, hyperbole is something that's commonplace in the IPL, but I don't think there's ever been a better, cheaper value for money auction buy than Wanandu Hasaranga at a base price for Sunrisers.
Yeah, that was the whole sequence of events there. And if you want to know more about this, go over to the Cricket Podcast and listen to our team previews. But the whole sequence of events that led to Hasaranga ending up at Sunrisers for 2 crore and Green ending up at RCB for about 1 million crore Hardik ending up at Mumbai for a pack of Watsits is some of the most bonkers and perplexing sports trading or administration you'll ever see. And I tend to agree with the Hasaranga point. Hasaranga as well. I mean, like, so he's taken 35 wickets over the last 2 years. He didn't really play that much last year. Like, this is a lot of that's based on the performance from 2 years ago in 2022 when he was virtually unstoppable. Last year, I think, did he have a hamstring injury going into the tournament or something like that?
Oh yeah, I can't remember. Yeah,
yeah, that limited his initial chances in the side, and then RCB did RCB stuff and didn't pick him. So he's taken 35 wickets in 86 overs over the last 2 years, which gives him a strike rate of 14.7. Which is, I think, you know, again, you take out some of the guys who bowl in the at the death who get a slightly artificially inflated strike rate because nobody cares about their wickets. Then he's pretty much the deadliest bowler in the tournament when it comes to expected strike rate versus what they're actually achieving. A really good player. I'm looking forward to seeing him play a lot more this year. Number 10,
and he's a gun fielder as well.
Well, yeah. So yeah, that's the limitation. It doesn't make it into Arthur, but that's the limitations of 4 overseas. Actually, we have picked 4 overseas, haven't we? 10, I've gone for Mohammad Shami, which I think is a pretty obvious choice. Most wickets in the last couple of years in the IPL, 48 wickets, an economy of 8, bowls in the power play, bowls at the death. Extremely good last year. And I think a player who, even though he's in his 30s now, is showing considerable improvement. Obviously, he won't feature this year in the tournament, which is a great shame for the Gujarat Titans. But over the last couple of years, I think it's hard to build a case for a seam bowler that has been more effective than him. I think the guy that you're going to pick at number 11 might be better, but he missed some time. So, looking at the whole piece across both years, Mohammad Shami, just an awesome performance from him.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. And I think now he's being used in his phases of super strength, more bowling up front rather than at the death. I think that really suits him as well. We might have to go into the tournament with 10 men this year though because of the injury, but I think this team is still good enough to come in the top 4 with 10 men. We'll say Anakul Roy as a subfielder or something like that.
Yeah, if you work on him, I think it's a fair criticism of Mohammad Shami's death bowling. If you have a look at just what he does in the last 5 overs of an innings, his economy inflates out to 10.3, so it's 8 if you measure all of his overs, and then up to 10.3 in the death. But then you do the maths on that, and you can pretty quickly deduce how effective his bowling in the power play must be to balance that off. It's still not. I mean, it's not ideal, 10.3, but if he's only bowling 1 over there, it's probably not unusably bad. And we have in our team got options with Rashid Khan and the next guy we're about to mention, and potentially even 1 over of Andre Russell to negotiate that phase of the game. And I think I'm happy to take the risk, bearing in mind the value he brings earlier in the innings. Number 11, Dan, who are you picking?
Yeah, we've got an impact sub as well, if we want to know the bowler. So yeah, number 11. I mean, like, literally, I cannot have any serious debate about the best T20 team in the world without this guy as like literally your first pick. Now, I went through the phase data for IPL pacers in power play and death who have got kind of any kind of reasonable sample size, and he is miles ahead of all pacers with economy rate in the power play and the death. Like, literally what you want from a bowler, which is an extremely rare skill set. This guy is the best, and it was such a shame that he missed last year, but I'm sure he'll be back and fully firing this year. The best all format pace bowler in the world. best T20 pacer in the world for my money, Jos Buttler.
Yeah. Bumrah, obviously, we're only looking at his stats from 2 years ago. Picked up 15 wickets, economy of 7.18. Now, there are a handful of guys with a better economy, like Sunil Narayan, for example, but factoring in when they bowled, that's a mind-blowing achievement that his economy is so low. I think
death as well, considerably sub 8 at the death.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. This is by the way, this is the death that I'm talking about here. 7.18 is his death economy rate. Bonkers low. What a great bowler. Dan, one thing that I was going to ask about this. Now, a lot of the teams in the IPL will structure slightly differently because we have the choice of everyone. We've got 2 Indian seam bowlers in. A lot of IPL teams will look to fill these positions with overseas bowlers. Now, if we hadn't decided to fill our middle order with overseas batters, are there any overseas seamers that you'd have considered for the dream team?
Not really. A couple who have got good phase data, I would say. So you'd have someone like a Hazelwood in the power play. Quite surprisingly, given his kind of relatively lower profile, Paterana at the death has been exceptional for CSK. Apart from that, you're really struggling. You're really struggling. And I think this proves that to me as well, that finding genuine all-rounders and genuine what I call 2-2 paces, 2 power plays, 2 death paces, they're the 2 hardest jobs to find if you're looking at recruitment. You've got no choice but to try and find high-level players for those skill sets. But the problem is there's not enough to go around. So if you can nail those 2 pieces of recruitment, you're in really good shape, because not only are you kind of adhering to a key strength for any T20 team in terms of drivers of success, but you're also depriving opposition teams from that luxury as well. So it's like a win-win. And yes, it's so tough.
Yeah. We've got one more selection to make. We might have to limit it to one because we want to get to a few questions as well. If we were able to bring an impact sub in, Dan, and I'll let you have this choice, who would you be thinking of?
I don't think we need any more batting.
No, I would agree.
I do think that if there's one, because we've got Shami, we've got Bumrah up front. We don't need anything in the power play. You could even get one out of Russell if you were really desperate, or Maxwell if there was 2 left-handers batting. But I do think that maybe we're a touch short of the death. And the problem is that, again, I've got the data here in front of me for death bowling in the IPL, and there's like 8 bowlers who have got an economy of under 9 in the last 2 seasons, of which only 3 of them have bowled over 20 overs at the death. So in terms of sample size, there's 3 players. Paterana has got by far the best data out of those, but we can't have him because we've got 4 overseas already. So it's a toss-up between Arshdeep Singh and Bhuvi. Arshdeep has way better economy at the death, but doesn't take wickets as frequently. Bhuvi has worse economy, but I say takes wickets more frequently, and it is arguably a better power play bowler. Take your pick.
I'd play Arshdeep, I think.
Yeah. Better death.
Yeah, I think if we're looking for somebody that might bowl there, I think I'd rather have a stopper than a wicket taker.
Agree.
If I was going to make the call. Cool. So there we go. I'll run through the team one more time. Let us know as well in the comments if you agree or disagree, and what your dream 11 would be. Let's have a little bit of fun. Shubman Gill, Jaiswal, Glenn Maxwell, Surya Kumar Yadav, Rinku Singh, Heinrich Klaasen, Andre Russell, Rashid Khan, Chahal, Mohammad Shami, Jasprit Bumrah, and then Arshdeep Singh as our go-to impact sub, or Bhuvi, running some drinks / an alternate choice there, which I think is pretty good. We're going to take a really quick break, and then we'll come back. We've got 4 questions this week to wrap up the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Strike Rate, the Cricket Analytics podcast. We're about to get on to questions. Thanks to the people that wrote in some new names this week. I think it's probably because I did the question shout out from my account rather than yours, so it's a different group of people. If you want to ask us a question in future, make sure you're following us on Twitter. Dan is at SA Advantage. I'm at JackHope0, and one of us will be tweeting out that we're looking for some questions. So let's start. Man from Seven Hills says, 2022 was played on very batter-friendly surfaces, and 2023 was the return to traditional home and away format. So it would be interesting to know how you would weigh players accordingly, if at all, in your consideration. Dan, I've got a slightly contrary view on that. So I would say I would weigh them the other way round. I thought 2023 was a much better year for batting than 2022. And obviously the impact rule change might have come into that. But I'd like to hear your opinion on whether you factor in sort of season performance into analytics when you're doing recruitment.
Yeah, kinda would be my answer. Okay, so the impact sub, I think last year on a broader point really changed everything in the IPL. I think we saw a much higher level of boundary hitting and general intent because players were aware that they had a more of a safety net. And I think we've seen the same in other leagues when that's happened as well. But on a broader point in terms of the venues, look, there's a few ways that you can do this. So before the 20-team mega auction, I built a model that took into account performances around the world for basically everyone in the auction list. Now, it was quite the job, as you might imagine, but afterwards it really clarified for me the depth charts that we were able to produce ahead of the auction, and there's other factors as well that you can throw into this as well. So let's say you've got, because we're going to go from like one extreme to the other here with this conversation. You've got a batter who bats at the Cheapawk, and you've got a batter who bats at Chinnaswamy. And there's probably no tougher venue to bat at than Cheapawk, and there's probably no easier venue to bat at than the Chinnaswamy. So 140 strike rate at Cheapawk does not equal 140 strike rate at Chinnaswamy. So what you can do is you can look at things like relative performance versus your teammates, and so then you're comparing that player's performance against top six batter against the same bowlers in the same conditions, basically as close to that as you can possibly want to find. And actually, if you're adding 20 runs, you're striking at 140, but you're averaging 20 strike rate higher than your top six teammates at Cheapawk, that's obviously pretty good. You're striking at 140 and you're averaging 20 strike rate less than your teammates at Chinnaswamy, that's not so good. And so there are ways of being able to quantify this as well and weighing up that type of thing.
Yeah, cool. Greg says he likes the idea of a post-COVID team. He asks, are there any players you think COVID has had a particular impact on, i.e. statistically performing worse than pre-COVID? And on the flip side, is there anyone that's performing considerably better? So are there players who you've noticed shift massively after that time? And there's a couple that actually did get COVID and it affected their performance. So George Garton, who's actually been on the Cricket Podcast and talked about this a little bit, he had long COVID and I think it probably quite substantially affected his career trajectory. Heinrich Klaasen was another one, wasn't he, who had long COVID and it took him a long time to recover. So there's like a 2-year gap in his career almost before he comes back and turns out to be unbelievable. It's a tough one to answer, but is there anyone that stands out to you, Dan?
Well, I think Klaasen's that trajectory eventually is obviously one standout. You got Rinku Singh, who's become a post-COVID breakthrough player, and the fact that we've got 3 domestic players in this top order with Gill, Jaiswal, and Rinku Singh, who are all kind of broken through since the pandemic, was just that actually a lot of young players are starting to break through. I've seen it a lot actually, and I think also we see it a little bit in the retentions in the 100 as well, which have been announced recently. Is that actually there's a bit of a changing of the guard, and we saw players like David Milan and Jason Roy get released, and other younger players or maybe slightly lower profile players now getting bumped up to higher salaries. And so there is a change of guard. And I do think that the pandemic affected older players more than young players initially, in terms of bouncing back and getting back into cricket after an enforced layoff. Obviously, it's going to be tougher for older players probably, but and I think that was borne out early. There's been certainly a lot of breakthrough players, too many to name, but in terms of younger players, yeah, I think that's probably helped quite a lot.
If you haven't looked into Jaiswal's development story over the last few years, I think that's a really interesting one as well. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether I describe this as impacted by COVID necessarily, but he did a lot of work. I think he spent 3 months working with coaches at Rajasthan Royals on his technique when hitting through the leg side. So basically what he was doing prior to COVID, and he was like a child at this point, I think, or maybe just after COVID. I think he was about 18 after he'd had that breakthrough under 19s ODI World Cup. He was doing a thing that they describe as casting in baseball, which is where your elbow comes away from the body, your sort of trailing elbow. And you might want to look at some pictures of this if you're at home to visualize it a little bit better. And what this meant was that he wasn't properly able to hit through the ball, which meant that in cricketing terms, his offside game was great, unaffected, like he had a full range of shots, but he really struggled to hit the ball in the air to the leg side. So he spent 3 months basically doing drills to get that elbow much closer to his body, which means that now he can access the mid-wicket and square regions, particularly for fuller deliveries here. And what England, basically just saw the outcome of this firsthand. What did he hit? Like 35 sixes. So I think when players are able to step away, if you've got a good coach and a good development plan and things like that, and bear in mind, you can have a bad coach and a bad development plan. So it's not like just taking time off or working on something in the nets is going to lead to results. This has to be done well. I think there's quite a lot of scope for big steps forward, and Jaiswal's a good example of what you can do if you remodel some things in how you hit a cricket ball. Next question.
Let's do it.
Apollo says, maybe not a question for this pod necessarily. Well, look, we're taking it, aren't we? But I would be very interested to see data-backed ranking systems for all T20 teams from major leagues across the world. Would some 100 or PSL teams, for instance, hold their own in the IPL? That's a fun question to answer. And I think probably the best IPL teams beat the best teams from other leagues in the world. But are there any T20 or 100 sides that you think you could drop into the IPL and maybe they challenge the playoffs?
Yeah, I do. I think the fact that now the IPL has expanded to 10 teams is a factor in that, because now you're picking more worse domestic players than you would have done with 8 teams. So a 6-team PSL, for example, in theory should have a less diluted talent pool than the 10-team IPL. So yeah, a team like a successful team in PSL, maybe Islamabad or Multan, competing in the final, I think they probably could at least hold their own in the IPL. I think that the 100 quality is undervalued by many of the people who actually don't want the tournament to happen. But I can tell you right now that the players all think it's very high quality. And I definitely think that the better 100 teams they wouldn't disgrace themselves in the IPL either. And I think you could also say the same for someone like a team like Perth Scorchers, who have consistently been well above average in the Big Bash over recent years as well. So there's a few options maybe.
It's got to be a team or two from the SA20 that would do pretty well at the moment as well. South Africa's domestic talent pool is pretty good, and they've got quite good overseas featuring in a lot of those lineups as well. So I think if you were, that would be the league I'd plump for. If someone said take the best team from all the leagues around the world and see how they do in the IPL, I think the SA20 team would be the one that did best.
Well, it's interesting because a well-structured ILT20 team should actually be able to beat everybody because you've got 9 overseas.
Yeah, but they're going through 25 players a year at the moment, and so
it's which about 22 are overseas.
Cool. Final question then from Nish. Thanks very much, everyone, for sending questions in. What are our top 3 favourite matches from the COVID IPL period? So say 2020 to 2022. They've gone for Mumbai Indians v Kings 11 Punjab in 2020 for that. That's a pretty difficult one. One of the things I'm not so good at, if I'm honest, is recalling individual matches. I think I can probably answer this one. And it would probably be the Rahul Tewatia game. So when Tewatia, I actually watched the highlights of this again the other day. It's unbelievable, but it's a real shame as well that there's no extended highlights, because the highlights that are on the internet are like 5 minutes long and they don't show the sort of 40 minutes of crucial gameplay. If cricket were organised well and marketed well, someone would have just taken the 40 minutes from when Tewatia comes in to when the game ends and put it on YouTube for everyone to watch, like they do occasionally with the NFL. Like if there's been an amazing quarter, the NFL will just put the whole game up on, or the whole quarter up on YouTube for people to watch. And it's the easiest and cheapest way to market yourself, is to do things like that, because people will share amazing clips if you give them the opportunity. Instead, it's all sort of hidden away. Anyway, that was a tangent, but basically Tewatia comes in, can't hit the ball off the square for 20 balls. The commentators are sledging him. He's batting with Sanju Samson, who is turning down singles. And then Tewatia hits, I think, 6 sixes in 7 balls, or 7 sixes in 9 balls, and they win with like 4 balls to spare. Like they go from lost, the game is over, and then he destroys Sheldon Cottrell. He's hitting him on a motorway, all sorts of mayhem. I can't think of one better than that.
The IPL team, and Sheldon Cottrell should not be bowling death at the IPL at that stage.
Well, yeah, like it's so that what was that? That was Rajasthan v Punjab Kings. I seem to remember there was an amazing Kyron Pollard game, maybe against CSK, where he took down Ngidi in the final over, which was maybe 2022. So
I've got one.
Go on.
And I've had to Google this to remember who is actually playing in the match. But I remember the game, like the finish was unreal. And I mean, I can't even remember what happened with dinner yesterday, let alone like a game. so yeah. I had to remind myself of what actually happened, but I remember the game. It was Sunrisers beating Rajasthan last season when Sandeep Sharma bowled the ball. Nothing happened, and basically Rajasthan won. They're all celebrating, and then the dreaded boop, 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 boop comes in. And Abdul Samad hit a 6 off the last ball to win for Sunrisers.
Yeah. Absolutely soul crushing. Dan, I think that's it for this episode. Thanks very much for listening and watching, everyone. Remember to hit that follow button or that subscribe button. And if you can share the podcast, please do. Dan, any final messages from you?
Yeah, just again, echoing what you said, Jack. Just keep sharing, keep liking, keep subscribing. Just please get this podcast out there to as many people as possible. Can't wait for the tournament now. It's going to be a great week.
Sports Social Podcast Network.